Hello and welcome to My Security TV. My name is Chris Cubbage. I'm the director with My Security Media. Welcome to our Tuesday afternoon Tech and Sec Weekly. Today we're going to be joined by Dr Dennis Kengo Oka, Principal Automotive Security Strategist with Synopsys Software Integrity Group, looking at attacking automotive keyless entry systems. Looking forward to this one. So if you have a keyless entry vehicle, this is one to watch for you, but also through the process of sort of red teaming vehicles, modern vehicles today as well for security vulnerabilities. And then we're going to be joined by Alice White, who is now the security training manager with Atlassian. And Alice wrote a very interesting and insightful article on how I navigated getting a job with Atlassian. And for those who may not know, Atlassian is a unicorn Australian tech company, very prominent. So she set her mind out. So it's a great article, and the day after International Women's Day, very much appreciate Alice's time coming on today for those insights. Now, we should be streaming, I'm trusting. We didn't go to LinkedIn the other day for some reason. I don't know why, but hopefully we are streaming okay. I'm just going to check that we are, and today we are going fine, so that's good to know. Okay, without further ado, we'll get straight into it. For those who may be following us for the first time, we cover on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We tend to go for that 45-minute to 60-minute range, and we probably will today. Hashtag MySecurityTV. Press like if you can. Please share us out to your colleagues. And also welcome to say good day and tell us where you're listening from. We will also release this out as a Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. And as I mentioned, we're streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, and on various Facebook channels with My Security Media and the Asia Pacific Security Magazine. Just a quick catch up from Friday. We spoke to Dr. Jens Gunneman, Managing Director with the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, looking at their sort of Industry 4.0, the smart factory technology, and a range of their different projects that they have. So very interesting with Dr. Gunneman. And then we were also crossed over to, he was in Atlanta, but this is the state of California is commencing with virtual reality decision tactics law enforcement training. So we looked at the virtual systems and in various training solutions in virtual reality for police, and obviously that's adapted from military, but it also will have security industry ramifications also. Two podcasts out from Jane Lowe, our Singapore correspondent, and this one we released yesterday as part of International Women's Day, The Big Biz of Crypto Crime, the pandemic year of 2020, and we were joined by Kimberly Grayer, the head of research with Chainalysis. Very insightful, looking at crypto crime, also money laundering on the dark net. So please check that out, episode 249, and her previous episode 248, Quantum Technology, with Dr. Tommaso Gigliardoni, also very insightful. So thank you to Jane for those. And also yesterday, we touched in with Jane. We released and opened for nominations the Top Women in Security ASEAN region. We did a live cross to Malaysia and formally opened that. So we've had a number of nominations already. Nominations close on May 30th. So if you know women in security within the ASEAN 10 nations, please reach out to them, make sure that they're nominating, or go ahead and nominate them for yourself. We are being supported by RSA this year with RSA Secure ID Suite. We've also this month been supported with ALC and their live virtual training, their certified training courses for cybersecurity, everything from the CISSP through to the SABSA. See the CISA there, a proud CISA holder here. But please check them out, and they're available obviously in the ASEAN region, but also here in Australia and New Zealand. And something we're running with My Security Media and Daniel Ehrenreich in Israel, SCADA and ICS cybersecurity courses. So this will be held over 4 weeks, 8 sessions. Please have a look at that. I've just put some introductory videos on the marketplace for that. And this follows 2-day workshops that we held in Sydney and Perth a couple of years ago when pre-COVID world. And then also, if you want to support the channel, we have a range of merchandise coming out. We've created initially cyber war series on China, Russia, and India, and the APTs of the panda bear and the real bear, and then obviously the tiger. So check them out. I'm wearing my panda bear as I do currently. So that's it from the marketplace. Without further ado, we're going to be crossing over to Japan and bringing in Dr. Dennis Kengo Oka. Hopefully I'm saying that right, Dennis?
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. I'm really excited to be here on the show today.
Very good. Thank you so much. You're Principal Automotive Security Strategist with Synopsys Software Integrity Group. Maybe let's just start off with your role and your background. Pre-interview, you've been with Synopsys for about 4 years, but yeah, how have you got into this quite an exciting and interesting field of work?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a little bit more, quick introduction to myself. So at Synopsys, I'm a Principal Automotive Security Strategist. I'm based in Tokyo, Japan, but I work with our customers in the automotive industry globally, helping them with solutions to develop secure and high-quality software. And I've been involved in automotive security since 2006. And it's been really amazing to see this journey the automotive industry has gone through, especially the last few years, this huge transformation where a lot more focus on cybersecurity is happening in the industry right now.
So are you finding you've locked in on this particular field? Is this something you really wanted to do, or you found you started off with some projects in 2006 and here you are 15 years later still in that field? It's must be a highly specialized field, but is that what you're finding, that it's so specialized it's almost difficult to leave?
I would say it's a really interesting field, and it's changing so fast. There's always new things, new developments. If you look at a car from 2006 and look at a car from this year or next year, it's completely different. So it's amazing to be in an industry that changes so fast, and there's always new things to learn. And that's really what excites me and has really kept my interest to stay in this industry.
Well, and the roadmap is quite exciting too, in terms of autonomous vehicles and basically sort of the service-driven approach to driverless cars as well. It sounds like you've got your career set out for you.
Exactly. Exactly. So moving forward, it's going to be even more things happening, which is really exciting.
But you won't ever be out of a job. I always say that with the security industry anyway, but you are in the driving seat. There you go. I'll take that. As I mentioned, we did episode 8. So this is going back a few years ago, 2017 at least. We interviewed the White Hat hackers, Dr. Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, who were with GM's Cruise Automation, and I will put the link out into the notes from that. But so we have previously, even though it's been a little while, looked at this area in terms of red teaming, hacking into a modern vehicle. You've got some slides to share. Let me bring them up and I'll get rid of mine as well. Talk us through. So this is basically an analysis of an attack on automotive keyless entry systems, and talk us through the process, Dennis.
Yes, thanks, Chris. So first, I just want to give credit to Lennart Voiters at the University of Leuven in Belgium, who discovered this vulnerability and reported it. It's a really interesting attack, so I want to go through on the next few slides how this actually happened. So first, I like to share how the system looks like, just to get an understanding of the typical use case. So on the left-hand side, we have a key fob, the small device that you use to unlock your car or start the vehicle, but it also has a feature to update the key fob itself. And on the right-hand side, we have the target vehicle. Within the vehicle, we have different views. One of them is called the BCM, the body control module. And these two devices talk to each other, the key fob and the BCM. They talk over low frequency and Bluetooth low energy. As you can see also, each of these components has a secure element, an SE, which is a hardware chip used to store cryptographic data or sensitive data, and also to perform various cryptographic operations. So from a design point of view, this looks pretty good because you have the security elements in there to help you with achieving security.
All right, yep, keep going. Yep.
I want also, sorry, I just want to also show you another use case, which is when you have a new key fob that you want to register to use with that vehicle. In that case, there are two steps. first you have to provision that key fob, and then the second step is to pair that key fob. So first I'll talk about the provisioning. And typically the way it looks like is you have the same setup as before, the key fob on the left-hand side and the target vehicle on the right-hand side. And in the middle, you see we have a technician PC using some kind of diagnostic software communicating with a backend HSM. And in this case, the backend HSM would generate a signed certificate that is valid for that key fob. So you know that you have a valid key fob that the backend HSM has signed, and that's part of the provisioning. The next step, which is then the pairing, you would have the same setup, except in this case, you don't need the backend HSM. You now have the key fob with that signed certificate, you have the technician PC with the diagnostic software, and you have the target vehicle. And the general idea here would be that when you want to pair this new key fob, you would provide this certificate to the BCM. It would then verify it to make sure that that key fob is a valid key fob that's been approved by the backend HSM, so to say. So that's the typical use case that we see for the key fob.
And where do you find most of those vulnerabilities are sitting? Is there sort of a known vulnerability sort of hotspot here in this process, or like any other technical system, there's going to be vulnerabilities at each stage through that you need to consider?
Yes, exactly. So I have summarized these vulnerabilities, weaknesses on the next slide here in this table. So it's a great question, great timing. And here we see the two target systems on the left-hand side, the key fob and the BCM. So starting with the key fob, as I mentioned, one of the use cases was to do an update of the key fob. And there's a vulnerability here. There's an improper signature verification of that firmware update, which allows an attacker to update a malicious firmware over BLE on the target key fob. This means that an attacker can take full control of that key fob. The second issue here is on the BCM side. And as I explained on the previous slide, typically during pairing, that certificate should be sent over to the BCM. The BCM should verify it, but it's actually missing that certificate verification. And this means that an attacker can then pair a modified key fob to the target vehicle BCM. So you don't need to have that signed certificate from the backend HSM. You can just use your own modified key fob and pair it with the vehicle. So those are the two main issues in this current system.
So you don't necessarily need access to that initial key fob. You can create your own, and then with that, once you've created that certificate, any key fob can then attack any other car?
Yes, so I can explain the steps here on the next slide, so it's clear how an attacker would perform this attack. So there are a lot of arrows and numbers here, but there are eight steps here, so 1 to 8, and I'll go through them one by one. We have the same setup as before, the target key fob on the left-hand side, target vehicle with the target BCM on the right-hand side, and the attacker would have to prepare what you see in the middle, the attack device. This attack device contains 3 parts. One is a modified BCM, and I'll explain what the modification is later on. And the second part here is the modified key fob. So both of these two, the modified key fob, modified BCM, are similar to the target BCM and the target key fob. The modification is what we have here running on the Raspberry Pi, is we emulate the SC, the secure element, using software. So rather than using the hardware chip, we have that SC functionality in software. So that's the modification. So now an attacker would start going through these different steps. So if I start with step 1, an attacker would physically walk towards the target vehicle and look through the windshield to find the VIN, the vehicle identifier number. And using this VIN number, the attacker can configure this emulated BCM SC to pretend to be the target vehicle. So the attack device, or the attacker will move this attack device then close to the target key fob. And using this modified BCM, generate a low frequency signal pretending to be the real target vehicle, and sending that signal over to the target key fob in step 2. This will cause the target key fob to wake up and advertise itself as connectable. So in step 3, the attacker will then connect over BLE to the target key fob. Since it's now been woken up and it's addressed itself as connectable over BLE, now the attacker has to exploit that vulnerability I mentioned before. Attacker sends a modified malicious firmware over BLE in step 4 and overwrites the firmware on the key fob. This allows the attacker to take full control of functionality in the key fob, including being able to execute certain commands to extract valid codes from the SC, from the secure element. So normally these commands would not be allowed over BLE, but using this modified firmware, an attacker is now able to extract valid unlock codes and, so for example, valid door unlock or trunk unlock code as part of that activity. So now in step 5, attacker will then move back towards the target vehicle physically and over BLE send these valid unlock codes, for example, unlocking the door. Since it's a valid unlock code coming directly from the target key fob SE, the target BCM will accept it and unlock the door. At this step, step 6, an attacker then has physically been able to gain access to the vehicle. The door is unlocked. I can go into the vehicle, and I can open up the panel underneath the instrument cluster, which is under the central display, which allows me access to the diagnostics port. So that diagnostic port is connected over CAN. So an attacker can now connect over CAN to the target BCM. In step 7, the attacker then tells the target BCM that you want to pair a new key fob, which is the modified key fob that the attacker has. So by sending this request to pair a new key fob, the weakness here that it's missing the certificate verification allows the attacker to use a modified key fob. It doesn't have the certificate, but it's possible still to pair it with the target vehicle. The target BCM now pairs this modified key fob, and in step 8, the attacker can use this modified key fob with a valid credential now to unlock the vehicle, to start the vehicle, and can then drive away. So that's really the steps that an attacker has to take, but it's fairly quick and allows an attacker to extract valid information from the target key fob and reuse it on the target vehicle.
Well, that's a good point. How long would this attack take?
So the thing that takes time is the firmware update, and that will take about 1.5 minutes. But you can do that at a distance of up to 30 meters. So you just have to be in the vicinity, but not too close to be able to do that update.
And this is to get entry. Is this to start the vehicle as well?
Yes, exactly. So in step 8, once we pair our own modified key fob, we are not able to start the engine as well, and then we can drive away. So
okay.
It allows us to really steal a vehicle.
Now, through this process, I suppose I'll take one step forward on that. Was there anything else for the vehicle itself to go, hang on, this is not our normal driver? Was there anything in the vehicle to say there's another extra layer of defense there, or once you'd started the car, that's it?
At this point, typically, if you have a valid key, which in this case it would be after you pair it, the vehicle will assume it's a valid key and let you start the vehicle. But I agree with you that you could always add additional security countermeasures there to detect, is this a normal time for pairing? Yeah, for pairing a new key, or is this activity the right activity that should be happening? And it also use various cameras on the vehicle to detect any suspicious activity. So there are different things that could be added, but this would need to be considered how you want to use that information and how you would actually alert or stop this from happening.
Yeah, you shouldn't be getting this far in the first place. Now, this was with a Tesla, right? This is August 2020. And then they've released an over-the-air OTA patch to address that in November 2020.
Yes, exactly. So this was a Tesla Model X. And what's interesting here, as you just mentioned, the information was provided to Tesla in August. They had some time to fix it quickly. And because they also have this OTA capability that allows them to perform an update over the air, they were able to, in a very short amount of time, come up with a fix and address this issue by pushing this out to the vulnerable vehicles.
Very good. Now, maybe talk us through what should have been done. If we talk about security by design here, and it sounds like a pretty basic system, particularly when you're just using Raspberry Pi and a Bluetooth. What level, and in terms of the patch, do you know what the patch involved in terms of what they've actually fixed? Because it sounds like when you're dealing with certificates and the like, if all you need is the VIN, the vehicle identification number, you should be getting something more than that.
Yes, so I don't have the exact details of what was actually patched when they fixed it, but I can talk a little bit more about, in general, how you should consider security for the development process. So rather than looking at one specific fix, I want to take a step back and look at how would you, in the automotive industry, consider the different risks and threats that are out there, and how would you apply the appropriate countermeasures and security solutions. So I wanted to go through a few steps here in the V model, the development process that we have typically used in the automotive industry. And starting from the left-hand side, we see we have security requirements review, secure design review, also have a TARA here, the threat analysis and risk assessment. And early on, when you design the system or develop the requirements for that system, it will be useful to understand what are the threats and what are the risks. So in the previous example, we can see that it's an attack where someone tries to update the firmware with a malicious firmware, or that they try to pair a modified key fob. Then you need to have those requirements and design in place that says we need to have a certificate verification, we need to have the proper requirements for detecting if there are certain attacks. If it fails, how do we detect it, and so on. And then you also need to have the actual implementation itself. Once you develop it, make sure that your software, your implementation is correct, using best practices for coding guidelines and so on, and also identifying any vulnerabilities in third-party components, open source software that you might be using. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have the testing and validation. So you would typically use various test approaches, such as fuzz testing, to help you find unknown vulnerabilities in that target software, as well as penetration testing, which would be a black box, typically a black box type of approach where you try to attack the system, or use like a gray box or white box approach as well. So that would help in understanding any weaknesses, vulnerabilities in the system before release of the product.
But just going back to this particular vulnerability or the successful attack, that's almost like an access type of vulnerability, correct? It wasn't a vulnerability with the certificate or anything like that. Just the system was accessible remotely with a simple VIN number. Am I right in that? Once you've got that VIN number, you're pretty much talking to the vehicle.
So if I go back to, let's see, maybe this one. So the VIN number here is used to generate a signal, a low frequency signal, to tell the target key fob that it's your vehicle that's asking you to wake up. So that's how the VIN number is used. Because typically, if you want to open, unlock your car door, or you want to start your car, there's a pressure to be as fast as possible. You don't want the user to wait 5 seconds or 10 seconds for the door to unlock or to start the vehicle. So often you would have something, I would say, fairly simple, such as some kind of signal that's based on the VIN. And this allows you to quickly say, hey, I'm your vehicle. There might be some ways to have more security here. going through some kind of handshake. But again, that would also add more time to the user to allow them to start the vehicle. So I do have, let me see, I switch to this one. I do have an example where I explain that this step here, the second step, as well as the first step with the VIN, that's the typical normal activity. So it would be hard to add additional security to those 2 points. But if we focus on steps 3 and 4, which allowed us to update the firmware on the key fob, and this was actually a vulnerability in, so they do have signature verification, but it's a vulnerability that allows the attacker to send a malicious firmware that doesn't have a correct signature, but it will still be flashed to the key fob. So this was a vulnerability in the implementation, and this could be found, as I say here on the right-hand side, using these different measures with static code analysis, software composition analysis, or with testing, fuzz testing, penetration testing. So that's really where one of the issues is, that you want to make sure that if you have a feature to allow you to update the firmware, which is good, you need to be able to do patching. You also need to make sure that that update procedure itself is secure and doesn't allow an attacker to abuse that feature. And
was it Synopsys that discovered this? Wasn't also out as a YouTube video already? And sort of how, if you did discover this, what was the process of doing that? You would have been looking at multiple potential vulnerabilities at the time. Do you sequentially work through this, or do you work as a team and sort of red team the vehicle? What was your process through here?
So this attack and the vulnerabilities was discovered by Lennart Wouters at the University of Leuven in Belgium. So he found the vulnerabilities. He designed this attack device and came up with this approach on how to execute the attack. And he also made a very nice YouTube video where they show how they go through it. What I tried to do was to perform an analysis of that to better understand exactly what the steps are. Because there's some details not publicly released yet. So I tried to extract that information, and based on my experience in industry and how these systems work, come up with this is probably where the challenges are and how you can address them.
Very good. And then use that as a learning opportunity for others in the sector. Okay, look, very good. I'll try to find that YouTube. I'll try to find that YouTube link if you've got it. But I think the other thing that we're looking at here is a cybersecurity engineering standard called ISO SAE 21342, and the regulations, UN Regulation 155 for cybersecurity, and these cover the automotive industry. So again, this is I'm trying to think which channel we put this on. I think we put it on our Drastic News channel, which is our drones and robotics and autonomous systems. Otherwise we would have put it on our Asia Pacific Security magazine. So I do have the release here, and it's again, as you pointed out, this is an analysis of this attack, which is well worth it. So thank you. Was there any more slides, Dennis, before we close off?
I do have one more slide here.
Go for it, mate.
If we have time for that.
Yeah, go for it.
So this goes to the second part of the attack, where you connect to the vehicle. So we have steps 5 to 8. And similarly, steps 5 and 8 are the normal activity of unlocking the vehicle with a valid code and starting the vehicle. So there's not much else we can do with those 2 steps. But steps 6 and 7, we have the weakness here of a missing certificate verification on the target BCM. So we don't really know if that was missing in the requirements or missing in the design or missing in the implementation, but we have different activities. We can do a review early on to detect that it's missing in the requirements or it's missing in the design. We can detect that there's a threat or a risk for this type of attack using a Tara, and also perform pen testing to actually detect that there is a missing certificate verification. So that's really how these different types of attacks, how you can think about security for addressing these type of attacks before they happen. Anyone interested, feel free to look at this blog as well, where I explain a bit more in detail the different steps that I talked about, or feel free to contact me. The email address is in the top right corner. So thank you very much, Chris, for the time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dennis. And I mentioned we have that blog on our channels too. So we've already put that out, but I'll make a note of that. Well, it's on the video anyway in terms of the recording. So that's the synopsys.com blogs software security key fob hack analysis. Very interesting. I don't have one. I'm actually hanging on to my Toyota for as long as I can until the driverless cars comes out. I'm just going to try and be as stubborn as I can and keep it serviced as we go. What's the roadmap, do you think, for the fully autonomous vehicles coming out, Dennis? What's your roadmap suggest?
Yes, so we definitely see that direction happening now with the autonomous driving, connected vehicles, and I think it's going to be stepwise. We're going to see some vehicles come out. We're still going to have our manually driven cars, so to say, and there's going to be an overlap period of time where we're going to have both autonomous and manual driving cars. And then gradually, we'll probably see that phasing out. But it's going to be very interesting to see how we can utilize these new technologies and really benefit as a society from these new technologies. So I'm really excited to see how the industry pans out.
Very good. Well, we certainly need people like you there checking out, at least doing the analysis. If someone at least finds a vulnerability and reports it, it's understanding and sharing that knowledge out, which is very, very important. So Dr. Dennis Kengo Oka there in Japan. I take it you're Tokyo based?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for the time
very
today.
Good.
Really appreciate it.
Pleasure, mate. All the best from Synopsys Software Integrity Group. Okay, I'll let you go. I'm going to put you backstage. All the best, Dennis. Right. Appreciate it.
Right.
Ciao. Okay, so that was the analysis of an attack on automotive keyless entry systems that was a Tesla that we looked at. Let me just bring these down, and I was looking forward to that, and I was looking forward to this one too. So we are now joined by Alice White, who is the Security Training Manager. Alice, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
Great. Now, you wrote an article, a post on LinkedIn that grabbed my eye. I'll give Shemaine Tanner kudos for that because she liked it, and it was brought it to my attention on LinkedIn, obviously. And I think it's really important to share. Obviously, this is part of International Women's Day. I was trying to align with that, but there's a lot here sort of to unpack. But maybe let's start with how I navigated getting a job with Atlassian and sort of what motivated you. It's your story. Over to you.
Sure. The job with Atlassian specifically was really about knowing their products and having used them in the past, seeing the role come up, having an Australian tech unicorn and their security journey as well. I was absolutely intrigued to what a software company looks like in terms of their internal security. And when this role popped up, it was actually in my group that I'm part of on LinkedIn called Australian Women in Security Network. I'm one of the chapter leads over in Perth. So it was part of that group that I saw the job role pop up, and I was so excited. I was like, this is a new role. It's a new team. I was like, I think I could do this. I think this would be one of those positions where I could really make an impact and add value quickly, being a relatively newcomer to the security industry.
Very good, and there's a lot there. I mean, we won't even go into we'll try to avoid the story of Atlassian. That's a big story to unpack. But they're about to open up new offices in Sydney here as well. Was that daunting for you at all? Was that not a consideration? It was the Atlassian story, or were you thinking of getting out of Perth and coming to the East Coast anyway?
No.
Okay, good. You'll notice I've got the Rottnest Island stubby holder up the top there. I keep that there for my memory as being a Perth boy. But yeah, so you're obviously prepared to move for this role.
Yeah, I was. It was one of the considerations that I had to take in. It was a role offered in Sydney, but as things have evolved and there's a new project internally, the Team Anywhere, where our workforce is of nearly over 5,000, is across so many different time zones and countries. The remote working has really embedded, and now we've just got to formalise how that can work and work best. It's really focused on the team coming together, be it remotely, digitally, and having the in-person and on-site factor as well.
Well, the other thing that's really stood out, and I'm just going to throw this up there because you said this is the article, the photo to your article, and that's an Atlassian backpack, and I think we wanted to get that logo in there too. But it says a lot just in that particular photo. There's a sense of pride and achievement in getting there as well. I'm just trying to think what the next slide is, and this is the other thing is it was so unique, the article, and how you've laid out your career. And as you say, you navigated this. It's almost Atlassian in its own right. And I can see that you're going to fit into that cultural aspect as well. And you were at Bankwest at the time. You've been HBF, IINet. So you've had a great pedigree, I suppose. You've been following this through. Talk us through, is this the right slide, Alice, 2005?
Yep.
So just talk us where. I'm proudly a ECU graduate myself in security science. Talk us through where you've started in your career, and you've done a bit of a transition out of safety and health into security as well, which is another very important sort of aspect I wanted to cover. But yeah, talk us through this slide.
Yeah, it was about 6 years ago when I was working at IINet. My role there is health, safety, environment and quality, bit of a mouthful, manager role. So I was leading the small team there, and part of the responsibilities was to ensure certification maintenance with ISO 9001. There was a security practice being set up in anticipation of going for federal government contracts, and that required ISO 27001 compliance, or at least showing progress towards that. So given that I was managing 9001, which is the basis of a lot of the other ISO certifications, my manager said, "What would you like to do? Would you like to help out?" And I was like, "Oh, this sounds interesting. Cybersecurity, that could fit in." I was doing data center security and safety as well. So I was sent on this course, and it was really off the back of that lead implementer course that I actually did with ALC over in Sydney.
Oh, nice. There you go. Good plug for ALC.
Yeah, it was a week-long course, and post that course, I just found myself still reading about privacy, security, watching YouTube, practicing hacks that I could learn. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I peered over the fence into what I call where the cool kids are. I was like, oh, this is something different and new, and I think I could do. And really from there, that practicing led to formalising it with a postgrad certificate throughout my other roles, and then taking the real jump and resigning and really going for a role in cybersecurity as well.
So, well, you've really been with some brand names as well, and I can say I've worked at least with HBF, but we knew the Bankwest team quite well as well over in Perth, particularly their cybersecurity. Did that experience at Bankwest change you as well? That would have embedded you much more deeply in that cyber outreach. In fact, years ago, I think I even put in for a job there. I was looking at a potential career transition. I'm glad I didn't get it. I didn't want a real job even back then. But how much did that change you and really embed? You've spent a good couple of years there.
I feel so fortunate to have started and been my first role in a bank which has such a mature level of security, such a massive team that I could learn from and really go and be a sponge and then find where I could add value, looking back at my other experiences in health and safety and auditing, etc. Hence, the governance and compliance role was the first one through to outreach, because I love talking to people and training people and watching them have those, oh, I get it now moments. That's what motivated me. So I'm forever grateful and fortunate to have that as my first role. And a lady called Barbara Cook, who I started talking to as part of my deliberate career transition. Networking was a big part of it. I think it's just about equally between what you know and who you know. So networking was really the other side of my career transition. I'd networked for nearly 3 years while I was at HBF and MBN, and at the end of INET, I went to all the industry events while I was still working in health and safety.
Right.
And I'd introduce myself when I got to these networking events or conferences, and they'd ask me, oh, so what do you do? And I'd say, oh, I'm a health and safety manager or an auditor. They're like, is she at the wrong place? And I was like, no, I'm going to be in information security. I'm doing a career transition. And then I got this, and off the back of just talking to people, I built this fantastic group of allies, mentors, sponsors. Everyone was super, how can I help you? Where are you at this week? They were intrigued that I would talk about it. So I was, again, very lucky to be confident enough to do networking, because it's not everybody's cup of tea, I tell you that, and it's exhausting. But I had these group of cheerleaders as well in my career, because I was excited about it, so were they.
Now, you've done a Bachelor of, all I can say is, and they always talk about not so much the soft skills, but a broad set of skills and background bringing into cybersecurity, because you don't want that sort of deep dive technical knowledge and you put your blinkers on to other things. Mm-hmm. How have you found, because you've even with that Bachelor of Commerce, e-commerce and management, that's now relevant, if you looked at the e-commerce, and you talked about quality, health, safety and environment, and we looked at that, think about what we just heard from with Dennis in terms of a keyless vehicle, and now you can just hack into a car and drive it away, and the potential safety issues around that as well. How have you found that contrast in that career transition? Would you say it's complete yet, your transition, but also the contrast between where you've come from, particularly around the safety aspect, and how you're finding the two contrast together or fit like a glove potentially? Yeah,
I'm going to say yes. I've definitely transitioned into where the cool kids are. Really future-proof myself. That was definitely one of the motivations for doing it, and I've always had an interest in tech. But I think I'll always draw from that health and safety background in what I do. Like information and cybersecurity, it begins and ends with the human. There is elements of security by design in both. Whether you engineer a control into the plant or equipment that you're designing, or you've got the human using that's high risk, or whether you're implementing technical controls into a cybersecurity layered defense, they apply the same concepts. It's still risk management 101. Mm-hmm. And when I say I think I've done the transition now, is I used to have to translate in my head and think about, in health and safety, this would be called a near miss or a high potential or a lost time injury or restricted work injury. Now I can think about it in reportable, notifiable data breaches. When you talk about the regulator, or it could be what's the time to detect, time to respond, time to remediate. It's all the concepts map to each other, like almost one-to-one. And so that really gave me the confidence to do that. And maybe I should speak more to health and safety professionals and get them to come into cybersecurity.
Look, it's one of those things. I was thinking the sector really needs people like you, and also because it's becoming increasingly regulated as well. A few years ago, information security, we had the old computer crime laws and the like, but they were pushing back on any regulation, but that regulation is now coming through, and it's those people in the background of safety who understand a regulated industry, regulated practices. The only thing, you did a bit of work with Downer there. The only thing I was going to say is, being West Australian, I'm not seeing a Rio Tinto or a PHP or a Woodside there. It's the only brand you don't have. But yeah, that regulated industry is very important, and what you're going to be faced with, sort of what we're talking about with big tech and the like. The other one, maybe let's focus on the terminology. You just highlighted some really important points there. What is your thoughts of the terminology in cybersecurity? Do you think it's okay? Do you think there's some more attention needed?
There's one thing that I'm really quite passionate about that I've seen in cybersecurity that I didn't see as much in health and safety, and that's genderized terminology.
Right.
There was been one moment in my career transition and networking that was awful and had a really negative experience, but from that negative experience, I only had the rallying of the whole industry, both men and women, where things like what used to be called man-in-the-middle attack.
Yes.
I got told as a joke during a conference, in the only female in the room, trying to learn a new technique, and I was following along nicely, that it's because girls don't hack. And I was so shocked.
I remember that.
Stand up for me in that room. The whole room exited because that was totally inappropriate. And I just, again, that confirmed that I was in the right place and I had the support and I was meant to be there.
And that was a university lecturer, I believe, from memory as well. And again, that's who's been training our new people coming through. So I do recall that. We won't mention the conference, but we all know. And in fact, I didn't know inviting you on, Alice. So that's really good that you've even brought that up. So those types
changed though, and it has changed. Even the Australian government has changed their information security management system guidelines and glossary. It doesn't include man-in-the-middle attack. It's now person-in-the-middle attack, and it's usually not even a person. It's usually.
I was going to say, I think there's another term that goes along that, which is explains it even better than person. But very interesting. Anything else in that in terms of contrast? I could maybe give an interest of time, metrics and measurements in this, and I noticed it's in your sort of job application as well. And Atlassian will be right on top of this in terms of measuring and looking at the metrics. What are those key ones that you find in a, say, security awareness training program, and maybe what you're going to be looking at implementing?
Awareness, one of the elements of the awareness program, and cultural development. Let's talk about phishing for the moment and phishing simulation and their effectiveness. I think it's really key for us as security professionals and making people feel included and changing behaviour to really look at the positive risk behaviours, not dwell on the negative risk behaviours. For example, instead of looking at the click rate on those phishing simulations, look at the amount of people that reported it and focus on that. Guide your executives on that and where that's at. Because if you talk about it in the terms of you might be patient zero, if you can save other people from even being exposed, then you can talk about risk and reducing the impact, because not everybody's exposed to it if we can pull it out of mailboxes. Positive risk behaviour should be really one of the elements, and that will give you, I think, more of a leading indicator as well about where your culture is going and if it's going in the right way, looking at those positive risk behaviours. But metrics are really hard. There's not a silver bullet. They need to be explained well, and you really need to know your audience when you're developing metrics as well. Is it for customers? Is it external facing? Is it internal? What's motivating? What's not? And the other thing I'd add there is having a red metric is not always bad. It will tell you where you need to pay attention and give some time and some love as well. So
probably a bit of a red flag if you don't have a red metric somewhere. Hang on, we can't be perfect, and no one is. How much do you align across the other organisation, or do you imagine? And we can you sort of randomly talk about the other organisations you've worked with in the past, but information security aligning to maybe physical security awareness training, and how much is that included in full? And then how much you might be talking to the safety and OH&S teams as well in terms of their security, and OH&S teams in terms of their sort of training program as well. Otherwise, people can't be trained all the time, and you have to align as to the timing and sort of the training cycle. How much do you work in with the organisation across that as well? How much do you align with those other business units?
Definitely need to understand what they're doing so you don't contradict anything, or make sure that you have that alignment with them. But physical is really morphing into as well information security. So yeah, that you definitely need to engage with that team to understand what they're doing. In the bank, we did that, only new at Atlassian, still need to get across that. But yeah, it is the full spectrum from physical security of data centers, which I worked on at IONET, is a key part of health and safety as well, both for the employee and for the data that you hold on all of those customers.
And do you fall within sort of the Atlassian CISO team? How is that structured?
Yeah, there's about 130 security professionals working in the CISO org. Yeah, and it's a growing team, so plug for if you want to come and work for us, look out for all the jobs that will pop up.
Wow, nice. And I suppose maybe that's a good way. What is your career projection? I don't have it. I did notice that there was, you're obviously a very capable person. What's your sort of career goals? Where are we going to see you in 5 years? Isn't that a good interview question? Where are you going to be in 5 years?
I used to say CISO, but having been exposed to
not with a new boss.
I've told Adrian that, or I'm going to tell Adrian that too. But no, I think more maybe an executive role that I can really help shape strategy. So that's having, that interesting background working in HR, health and safety, auditing, but also how it crosses over into tech. I think there's opportunity to be in a senior executive strategic role in the future. And I'd love to get into being on a board. That would be, I think, really, and starting with maybe a not-for-profit. I think I could offer an organisation or a charitable organisation, offer them some insights and the understanding across boards of cybersecurity, information security, especially as it becomes more regulated, and they could be personally and professionally responsible for an incident and breaches. I think that's a really interesting addition to a board maybe that I could provide in a couple of years.
Wonderful. Look, you're going to get some great insights there at Atlassian, no doubt. We do use some of their tools. I'll give them a plug. It's great to see you having been trained by one of the sponsors as well. That's great. Look, what I'll do is we'll definitely reach out to Alice on LinkedIn. I think you can read her post is available there. But really, really well-explained journey in terms of that career progression, your motivations, your mentors, your challenges, and also that career transition. It's a great story. So we'll stay in touch. And when you're over in Sydney, we'll meet you at come and join Osaka, the local chapter here. But otherwise, you'll be you should be on the speaking tour when you come to Sydney and talk about this. I think it's very interesting. So thank you very much, Alice.
Thank you, Chris. It was great to be here, and I'm glad I got to share a little bit further and wider.
Absolutely. So Alice White, Security Training Manager, still in Perth, but on her way to Sydney with Atlassian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye. Oh, that was a lot. And the final kit. So that's what you get. Welcome to the team, Alice, and a set of, I think it's a towel as well. That's it. 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. So well done. Okay, so that's it from us. In terms of what we've got, I'm not doing a report of the day today. I'll just get rid of that. Just some news from Fujitsu today. I thought I'd just rise literally just before we came on air. Fujitsu and Riken complete joint development of Japan's Fugaku, the world's fastest supercomputer. I thought since we crossed over to Dennis in Tokyo there, I'd put this up for Fujitsu. Fugaku has claimed the world's top spot for 2 consecutive terms in June and November 2020 in 4 categories on the major high-performance computer rankings. It's top of the top 500, HPC Global, HPL AI, as well as the Graph 500. And we might sort of cast back to our podcast with Lenovo. The Lenovo team won't be happy about that, but well done to Fujitsu. And also news out of Fujitsu today, Fujitsu, KBR and Leidos have been selected as part of the Australian Defence ICT environment for their $175 million program. So congrats to Fujitsu. And on Friday, we'll be looking at the darknet, I hope. This is a report out from the Australian National University, and I'm just in contact with them now to bring on their lead researcher. He hasn't confirmed, But again, this story is up on, I think we put up on the Australian Cybersecurity magazine. And since Jane Lowe just did some podcasts with Synopsys on the darknet and crypto crime, this will be a good one on darknet takedowns and how they're disrupting the drug market. So that's a good one for Friday. Otherwise, please support the channel. Check out our T-shirt series and our merchandise. But that's it from our Tuesday episode of My Sec TV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. And we'll see you on Friday.